My name is Carly, and this is my poet presentation on Claudia Rankine. So who is Claudia Rankine? What is her background? What was her inspiration or muse for this collection? And what are some prevalent themes that she uses in her works? So Rankine was born in Jamaica in 1963. Growing up, her mom would often read Emily Dickinson, her poems and her works to her, and she claims that Emily Dickinson was one of her biggest inspirations and actual reasons why she became a writer. She earned her bachelor's degree in English from Williams College and her MFA in poetry from Columbia University. In 2013, she was elected a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, and she was also honored with the Jackson Poetry Prize. In 2005, she was awarded the Academy Fellowship for Distinguished Poetic Achievements by the Academy of American Poets. In 2016, she was awarded the MacArthur Genius Grant. In 2017, she founded the Racial Imaginary Institute, and I'm going to be talking more about that institute in just a second. And she is currently a poetry professor at Yale University in Connecticut. So, one huge reason why I ended up choosing Rankine is because I love how she incorporates her passion and her ideas for change into her literature. So she actually founded what is known as the Racial Imaginary Institute, and she says, "The racial imaginary is concerned not with who has the right to write about race, but rather with where the desire comes from and how to detect when race is taking up residence in the creative act." In 2011, she published an open letter, and she addressed it to her friends, inviting them to share their thoughts and experiences on race. She wanted to learn her friends' difficulties and advantages and fears, expectations and anxieties when it came to their race, and so many responses came in, and it was so successful that she ended up making it a project, and she named it the Racial Imaginary. So these are just some of her poetry collections over the past year, some of her contemporary works. The one I'm going to be discussing is The End of the Alphabet. So she published The End of the Alphabet on September 14th, 1998, and it was published by Grove Press. Claudia Rankine writes poems in this collection that are all associated with alienation in one way or another, whether it be from her home, her body, or her mind. She's very honest and vulnerable in this collection while she's talking about love and loss. She writes about somebody she falls in love with, and she mentions how her home doesn't feel like home. So one of the biggest things that I picked up throughout the collection was her use of symbolism. In almost all of her poems, if not all of them, she mentions either a type of flower, a type of bird, or parts of an eye, like the anatomy of an eye. And I found this very interesting, so interesting that I ended up looking up symbolism, the symbolism behind these flowers, birds, and eye parts every time one came up. And to my surprise, they all symbolized something that went with the poem and the content of the poem. And I don't know if this was Rankine's actual intention, but it was very cool, as a reader to pick up on this. One example is in Residual in the House, the line says, "She had to excuse herself, not that the bougainvillea moved or the neighbors stood still, but because he would see through her." So once I found out that this type of flower, a bougainvillea, symbolized peace, the line and the whole section and the whole poem actually pieced together even better than it already did. So I believe that the aesthetic of the collection was optimistic, but at the same time existential. She would write about existential instances where she felt nobody would love her again, or nobody would understand what she is going through, but she would always turn it around and end with topics such as self-love or, positivity. Many of Claudia Rankine's collections, one including The End of the Alphabet, all contain similar themes that tackle issues such as love and loss, alienation, self-assurance, and racial conflicts. This was my favorite poem out of the entire collection. This first line is, "Better to let the mind feel the best it can and shatter the heart, its recycling machinery." This next part of the poem says, "How to pity me. Remember, so that the evening breeze would be refreshing, I went into the sun, stood there as an idiot might, and after all clouds passed, ran around accumulating discomfort. The purpose? To emphasize, to show I take pleasure, appreciate all this, the relief it brings me. So you, in this role as your own rescuer, troubled voice, trying on happiness, groomed echo of another. Look out for yourself, go outside, stand up, straighter, flirt." So this part of the poem just reminded me that, to remember how good the breeze feels, you have to go into the sun. Which means to remember how good is, you have to go through the bad. And at the end of the day, look out for yourself, practice self-care, and remember that the good is the good, even when you're experiencing the bad. So my second favorite poem, and another poem that I suggest to you guys, is this one. And the lines, my favorite lines, say, "Don't ask to be told X to Y in times or eternity. Passage bleeds between the hammering, breath and flesh, sweetness mumbled, in the voice nice, just as the lips open the eyes." To me, this is saying, don't expect to know the answers. Listen to the world, listen to the sweetness, and as sweetness in life speaks to you, open your eyes and open your mind to it. Also, after some research, I found that she notices these connections with race, and she calls them micro and macroaggressions. She writes of the world as someone who suffers the misperceptions and subtle transgressions of friends and family. She refers to these as microaggressions, and she used the example of her friend who was babysitting, and this friend had the neighbors called on him because he was black, and the neighbor thought that he could have been a threat. And this is an example of a microaggression. And she also has this thing called a macroaggression, which she feels results in the death of black men. And she thinks that macroaggressions are being committed by ordinary citizens or juries, lawyers, prosecutors, well-educated prosecutors, she says. So she says that anybody can be guilty in causing micro and macroaggressions. And I just thought this classification was something of importance. Also, this quote, "There's something very moving about having so many people step into a subject that I have been consumed with for so long and suddenly understand the urgency that I have been feeling for 20 years. She doesn't identify herself as an activist, but when she's asked if she is one, she always refers to this quote by James Baldwin. "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So in conclusion, Rankine is an incredibly talented creator. Her writing style is unique, and her collections cannot be compared to many other contemporary poets. She uses her passion for change and dedication to equality and incorporates these ideas into her literature. I look forward to reading her other collections and to continue to be inspired by her projects.